"You're not needed at Christmas, Grandma. Mom says it's going to be just us this year." That was the message my grandson sent me. 14 words that felt like being quietly escorted out of my own life. I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading it again and again, as if some other meaning might reveal itself. But no, there it was. Plain, clean, cruel. Not even a phone call. Just a message. Just, "You're not needed." It was December 22nd. The lights on the little artificial tree in my living room blinked patiently, oblivious. I hadn't even put ornaments on it yet. Waiting, like every year, for my family to help. We always did it together. Or used to. I sat down heavily in my chair. The ache in my knees throbbed, but that wasn't the pain that made me bite the inside of my cheek. I didn't answer the message. What was there to say? Should I ask why? Should I pretend I didn't mind? Should I beg? No. I'm too old to beg. My house smelled like cinnamon and lemon polish. I had cleaned the day before, expecting company. The table was already set with my mother's old porcelain. 3 plates, just in case. I had even picked up a small turkey, though I'd been worried it might be too much for just me. Funny. Turns out it was too much even for one. I got up and walked slowly to the sideboard where I kept the photo albums. My fingers knew exactly which one to find. Christmas has gone by. My son, Michael, with wrapping paper on his head like a crown. Me, in my green sweater with snowflakes, laughing at something I no longer remember. And the little one, Owen, my grandson. Chubby hands clutching toy trains, face smeared with chocolate. Once so attached to me, he refused to go to bed unless I sang him the lullaby. The same Owen who now typed, "You're not needed." I closed the album. At some point I moved to the kitchen. I'm not even sure how. My body just moved, out of habit. I stood by the stove for a while, staring at the unlit burners. The turkey was still in the fridge, uncooked, waiting, like me. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears hum, like they're protesting the absence of life. I sat down again. The message was still open on my phone screen. My finger hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "I see," then deleted it. I typed, "Understood," deleted again, then I put the phone face down. That night, I didn't sleep. The heating clicked softly, the kind of sound you don't hear unless everything else is silent. I lay in bed, under the heavy quilt I had sewn when my husband was still alive. Derek would have had something to say. Something sharp, maybe? Or something funny. "Well," he'd say, "looks like we got fired from Christmas." But Derek had been gone 8 years, and I had no one left to laugh with. The next morning, I made tea and didn't drink it. I tried to read and couldn't get past the first page. I turned on the TV, but the cheerful music and jingling bells felt like mockery. I kept looking at the tree, still bare. And then I stood up. I went to the closet and pulled out the blue wool dress I hadn't worn in over a year, brushed it off, tried it on. It still fit, more or less. A little loose at the waist, but that was fine. I found the earrings Owen had given me for my 70th. Tiny, fake pearls in a silver setting. I put them on. Then I took out the tin of cookies I had baked 3 days ago, sugar and spice, his favorite, and wrapped them in a clean towel. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't even call a cab. I took the bus, like I used to. Route 43, then the 17, all the way to that part of town with the big houses and even bigger gates. It was already snowing lightly, a dry, powdery kind of snow that doesn't stick but makes everything quiet, like the world was holding its breath. When I got off at the corner, I had to walk 4 blocks. Slowly. My joints protested, but I walked. I held the tin of cookies tight under my arm like it was something sacred. Their house was lit up like a magazine photo. Wreaths on the windows, candles in every pane. I stood at the sidewalk for a moment, heart pounding. I could hear music faintly, laughter, clinking glasses. The party had already started. I walked up the path, my boots crunching softly on the gravel. Reached the door, raised my hand to knock, then lowered it. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe I should turn around. Maybe I was being pathetic. But then I remembered the message, and I knocked. The knock echoed louder than I expected. A sharp sound against the polished wood, slicing into their celebration like a pebble thrown into still water. For a second, there was no response. I almost convinced myself no one would come. That would have been easier, cleaner. But the door opened. It was Owen. His eyes widened when he saw me. His mouth opened, but no words came. Just a breath, sharp, shallow, like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "Grandma," he finally said, voice cracked at the edges. What are you doing here?" I looked at him, really looked. Taller now, broader in the shoulders, wearing a sweater I didn't recognize. And older, somehow, but still my grandson. Still the boy who used to curl into my lap and demand stories about foxes and flying bicycles. "I came to drop off your cookies," I said simply, holding out the tin. "I baked them for Christmas. I thought, since I wasn't needed, I'd at least bring them." He didn't take them, just looked at the tin, then back at me. "Grandma, I didn't mean, is everything okay?" A woman's voice called from inside. A voice I knew too well. Megan, his mother, my daughter-in-law. She appeared behind him, holding a wine glass, hair perfect, lipstick bright. She saw me and stopped mid-step. "Oh," she said, her tone not surprised, but annoyed, like I was a door left open in winter. "Hello, Megan," I said, voice steady. "I thought Michael texted you." I looked at her. He didn't. Owen did. That landed. Her jaw tensed. She turned to her son. "We talked about this." Owen looked at the floor. "I just thought—" "You thought what?" she snapped, too sharp for a holiday evening. Then she caught herself, looked at me, and tried to soften. "Edith, we just thought it might be easier this year. Smaller. You know how chaotic it gets." "I know," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I know exactly how it gets." She froze. I was in the foyer now. The warmth hit me like a wave. Expensive perfume, pine, the faint smell of glazed ham. The laughter from the living room had dimmed. People had noticed. "Mom?" Michael's voice came from down the hall. Heavy footsteps. He appeared around the corner, tie crooked, cheeks pink from wine. When he saw me, he stopped. His face changed. Not guilt, not joy, just discomfort. "You weren't supposed to be here," he said, too blunt, too honest. "I noticed," I answered. He looked at Megan, then Owen, then back at me. "We didn't want to upset you." "Then you should have told me the truth," I said. That would have been less upsetting. Behind him, I saw glimpses of the dining room, a long table with crystal glasses, linen napkins, glowing candles. My plate wasn't there. "Mom," Michael said, rubbing the back of his neck, "this year's just been a lot. Megan's parents are here, and with the kids, and space is tight. We figured it might be too much for you." "I hosted 30 people in a 2-bedroom house when you were 10, I said. "I don't recall anyone worrying about my space then." He flinched. "I'm not here to cause a scene," I added. "I just wanted to see my family on Christmas." Silence fell like a blanket over the room. Megan took a slow sip of her wine. Michael looked anywhere but at me. And Owen, my sweet, silent boy, finally reached out and took the tin from my hands. "Thank you," he whispered. I love your cookies. I smiled. Small, tired, but it was something. Behind them, a little girl peered around the corner. Clara, my great-granddaughter. She was 7, maybe 8 now. I hadn't seen her since Easter. She looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to wave or hide. Hi, Clara, I said gently. She smiled and ducked behind the wall. Well, I said, stepping back toward the door, I should go. Wouldn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. Michael opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Owen looked devastated. Megan said, That might be best. I nodded. Merry Christmas. I walked out without waiting for more. The cold slapped me harder this time, like it knew, like it agreed. I didn't cry on the way home. Not then. I just sat on the bus with my hands folded in my lap, the scent of cinnamon lingering in the air. No one spoke to me. No one looked at me. When I got home, the little tree was still blinking, stupid and cheerful. I sat down at the table and lit the candle in the middle. One of the old ones, half burned, wax cracked with age. I sat there for a long time. Then I picked up the phone. Not to call them, not to fight, but to call my lawyer. The lawyer didn't pick up right away. It was Christmas Eve, after all. But I left a message. My voice was calm, deliberate. Hello, Mr. Halverson. It's Edith Thornberry. I'd like to schedule a meeting after the holidays. We need to revisit the terms of my will. Yes, again. I ended the call and placed the phone gently back on its cradle. The weight of it, so familiar, felt different now, like something I was setting down for good. The house was quiet again, but not empty. Not anymore. Something had shifted. Maybe not in them, but in me. I walked to the hall closet, pulled down the battered shoebox marked private. Inside were yellowed documents, old checkbooks, a small stack of letters tied in blue ribbon, and tucked between them, a file folder labeled with my own handwriting. Financial, kids. I opened it and ran my fingers along the pages. Loan records, transfers, little notes in the margins. Michael, car down payment, $5,000. Owen's private school donation, $2,300. Megan, kitchen remodel, loan, $8,000, no repayment schedule. It added up, slowly, painfully. The numbers weren't as important now as the realization. I'd spent years trying to earn my place at a table that was already mine. For what? A polite smile once a month? A text message on my birthday? A forced lunch in early spring where everyone looked at their watches? I used to tell myself that love meant giving, that mothers gave without keeping score. But this wasn't love anymore. This was survival, with a performance. I closed the folder and set it aside. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because of sadness, not even because of anger, but because my mind was alive in a way it hadn't been in years. I woke up early on Christmas morning. The sky outside was a dull gray, snow dusting the sidewalks like powdered sugar. I made myself toast and scrambled eggs. Ate slowly, deliberately. A woman with time. At 9, the doorbell rang. It was Reed. He looked nervous, snow clinging to the shoulders of his coat, cheeks red from the cold. He held a small gift bag in his hand. I figured you'd be up, he said. I always am, I replied, stepping aside. Come in. He wiped his boots and entered. The moment he saw the little tree, still blinking without ornaments, something shifted in his face. Regret, maybe? Or shame? I didn't know, he said quietly. About the message. About what Mom and Dad planned. I swear I didn't. I nodded. I believe you. He looked relieved, then hesitated. You shouldn't have come, though. Not like that. Why not? He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. It made everything awkward. For who? He met my eyes, and for a second I saw the boy again. The real Reed. Not just Michael and Megan's son, but someone who still had a moral compass. I'm sorry, he said. I nodded again. Thank you. He handed me the gift bag. Inside was a hand-knit scarf in a soft, earthy green, and a note. For the woman who taught me how to make cinnamon stars and how to tell the truth. Love, Reed. I ran my fingers along the stitches. He hadn't bought this. He, or Audrey, perhaps, had made it. That meant something. I'll put the kettle on, I said. You'll stay for tea? He nodded. Please. In the kitchen, we moved like we used to. Him setting out mugs, me spooning sugar. We didn't say much, but it was enough. I don't know what's happening to our family, he said at one point, not looking at me. It's like everyone's performing for each other, pretending. Like Christmas is just an event for Instagram. Maybe it is, I said, but not here. He looked at me, eyes wet. You didn't deserve that, Grandma. No, I said, but I accepted it. Once. I sipped my tea. The warmth was good. Are you changing the will? He asked suddenly. I didn't answer right away. Why would you ask that? He flushed. I overheard Dad talking to Uncle Phil about how he had it locked in. Your house, the accounts. He said he was just waiting, like it was all just a matter of time. My stomach turned. Did you know, I said, that I paid off the down payment on that house they live in now? Reed looked at me, stunned. Did you know I co-signed the loan for your father's business, even though the bank warned me not to? He shook his head. I smiled, faintly. Of course you didn't. That's not what people remember. Silence. But I remember, I said, and that's enough. Reed reached across the table and took my hand. I don't want anything from you, he said quietly. Just don't give up on all of us yet. Some of us still see you. That almost undid me, but I held it together. Finish your tea, I said, squeezing his hand gently. Then help me decorate the tree. The ornaments were stored in an old biscuit tin that smelled faintly of nutmeg and mothballs. Reed carried it carefully into the living room, while I followed with a small box of lights, most of which still worked. Some of them didn't, but I liked their flicker anyway. It reminded me that not everything needed to be perfect to feel right. Reed sat cross-legged on the rug, pulling out each ornament like a small treasure. This one's heavy, he said, holding up a glass angel with a chipped wing. That one's from 1973, I said. Your father knocked the tree over trying to catch a football in the house, broke 3 ornaments, but this one survived. Barely. Reed smiled. Should have been a sign. We laughed. For a moment, it felt like something real again. We dressed the tree together slowly. No rush. I watched him hang the old felt gingerbread man he'd made in kindergarten, the one with crooked eyes and a missing button. I used to keep it near the top, right next to the star. This year, he put it there again. Perfect, he said softly. We didn't need to say more. The tree glowed, slightly uneven, faintly mismatched, but warm and full of memory. Afterward, we sat by it, cups of fresh tea in hand. The snow outside had thickened, coating the neighborhood in quiet. No cars, no footsteps, just the gentle hum of winter wrapped around the house like a blanket. I don't know what happens now, Reed said. I mean, after this. Neither do I replied. But I do know what won't happen anymore. He looked at me. I won't wait for them to remember I exist. I won't shrink myself to fit the edges of their lives. I'm done knocking on doors that were built to stay shut. He nodded, silent. Besides, I said, sipping my tea, I still have keys to my own house. That's more than most people my age can say." That made him laugh. A real laugh. Not the polite kind. Then he grew quiet again. "You know what hurts the most?" I waited. "That it wasn't just Mom and Dad who excluded you. It was me too. I didn't stand up. I didn't say, 'Why isn't Grandma invited?' I just let it happen." "You're here now," I said. He looked down. "It doesn't fix it." "No, but it's a start." A long pause. "I talked to Audrey," he said. "She was furious when I told her. Said she would have skipped the dinner if she knew. She wanted to come with me this morning, but I think she thought you'd need time alone." I smiled faintly. "She was right. But next time, tell her I'd be glad to see her." He nodded. "I will." The clock ticked softly on the mantel. The kind of ticking you forget is there until silence lays it bare. Reed glanced at his watch. "They'll probably wonder where I am." I raised an eyebrow. "Not that they deserve an answer," he added quickly. "You don't have to lie," I said. "But you also don't have to explain. You're allowed to choose where you belong." He stood and gathered his things slowly. Then he turned, uncertain. "Would it be okay if I came again tomorrow? Maybe brought Audrey? Maybe we could help you clear out the attic or something." I smiled. "You can come for any reason, or no reason at all." He stepped forward, hugged me gently. "Love you, Grandma." "I know," I whispered. And I did. I believed him. After he left, I stayed by the tree for a while longer. The lights cast soft shadows on the walls, shifting as the wind nudged the curtains. I thought about the dinner I'd walked into, the forced cheer, the eyes avoiding mine, and I thought about my hand on the doorknob, the hesitation, the quiet voice inside that had said, "Don't do it. Walk away." But I hadn't walked away. I had stood there, held my ground, and reminded them all who I was. Not a guest, not a burden. Their mother, their grandmother, their past, whether they liked it or not. I looked around the room, small, old, familiar, not polished or perfect, but mine, full of stories no one else could tell. And if they didn't want to hear them, so be it. I would tell them anyway, even if it was just to myself. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds tapping at the window and snow sliding off the roof in wet, heavy clumps. For a moment, I forgot what day it was. Not because of age, but because for the first time in years, I didn't care. The day wasn't defined by a family calendar, a dinner plan, or anyone else's permission. It was mine. I made oatmeal the old way, with brown sugar and chopped walnuts, just as Derek used to like it. I even set a place for him at the table, his cup, his napkin, the butter knife he always claimed was just the right weight. Not because I believed he'd return, but because remembering him this way felt more honest than pretending he was some closed chapter. We were never that simple. Around 10, the doorbell rang. It was Audrey. She stood there in a wool coat, cheeks pink from the cold, a thermos in one hand and a little box in the other. "Reed's parking the car," she said. "He made me promise I'd knock first." I smiled. "Come in, dear." She stepped inside, looked around, her eyes scanning the room like it was a story she'd heard about but never visited. "It's really warm in here." "Old houses hold heat," I said. "And grudges." She laughed. Not politely, really laughed. "I brought peppermint hot chocolate. Reed said you liked it." "I do," I said, "though he likes to drown it in marshmallows." She grinned. "He still does." We sat in the living room while the tree blinked quietly beside us. I poured the drink into mugs, and Audrey handed me the box. Inside was a little felt ornament, a fox in a red scarf, holding a book. On the back was stitched somewhat awkwardly, To Grandma Edith, with love. Foxes were always his favorite, I said, voice tight. He told me you used to make up stories about one named Thomas. Yes, Thomas the Fox, who wore glasses and read mysteries by candlelight. He always found the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. She smiled. Sounds familiar. Before I could reply, Reed came in, dusting snow from his coat. Sorry, he said, breathless. Had to park a block down. Someone's having a brunch party on the corner. Popular neighborhood, I murmured. He kissed Audrey's cheek, then hugged me. Not one of those stiff hugs men give when they're trying to fulfill a duty. A real hug. We spent the morning in the attic, as promised. Dusty boxes, old photo albums, a typewriter Derek had sworn he'd repair one day. We laughed over forgotten knickknacks and argued over whether a certain lamp was vintage or just hideous. At one point, I found a shoebox filled with old cards. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmases from when Michael and Megan still signed them with "Love, Mom and Dad," and not just the Thornberrys. I set it aside without a word. Around noon, we came downstairs. I made soup, potato and leek, the kind that doesn't try to impress anyone but always satisfies. We ate in the kitchen, sunlight pouring through the curtains, turning the room gold. Do you think they'll call? Audrey asked gently. I don't expect them to, I said. Not now. Reed looked up. They're still pretending yesterday didn't happen. Mom asked if I enjoyed my walk. Dad hasn't said anything at all. That's their right, I said. And mine is to stop waiting. Audrey touched my hand. You're not alone. I know, I said. Not anymore. After they left, I stood in the doorway, watching their car disappear down the street. Then I went to the bedroom and pulled out a small lockbox from under the bed. Inside were the legal documents, deeds, insurance papers, my will. I opened it slowly. The old version was there, the one that split everything equally between Michael and Thelma. The one I'd drafted back when I believed that fairness meant love. I took it out. Then I pulled a blank form from the bottom of the box. Time to start again. Not out of revenge, not to punish, but to protect what mattered. To stop rewarding those who saw me as a piece of property, something to be managed or dismissed. I looked around my little house, at the tree, the half-empty soup bowls, the felt fox now hanging beside the angel with the chipped wing. This was my life. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine again. 2 days after Christmas, my phone rang just before dusk. It was Thelma, my daughter. We hadn't spoken in almost 5 months, and even then, it was a rushed birthday call I had to remind her to make. Now, her name flashing on the screen made my stomach tighten. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? Mom? Her voice was cautious, clipped. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up. Well, I said, here we are. A pause. Then, Michael called me. Did he? He said you showed up at Christmas uninvited, that it caused a scene. I laughed, but it wasn't a joyful sound. I knocked on my grandson's door. I didn't realize being a grandmother now requires clearance. He said you embarrassed Megan in front of her family. Did she mention the message they sent me? What message? I walked to the window, stared out at the quiet street. The snow had iced over, the world frozen in place. Owen texted me, said I wasn't needed, that Megan didn't want me there. The silence on the line stretched thin. That's not right, Thelma said finally. No, I said. It isn't. She exhaled. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. It's not the first time, Thelma, just the most honest. I should have been there. No, I said, turning from the window. You should have called. Months ago. You should have remembered how much I gave and how little I asked. Another pause. I imagined her sitting in her kitchen, fingers tracing the edge of a mug, trying to decide if it was worth it. This call, this truth. You sound different, she said at last. I am. She didn't answer. I'm revising the will, I said plainly, and all the automatic transfers have stopped. The words hung there, stark and final. You're serious, she said. I am, I replied. I've supported you both for decades, quietly, willingly. But the respect that was supposed to come with that never arrived. So I'm adjusting my expectations and my paperwork. Mom, don't do anything drastic. I already have. A long breath. Is this because of one bad Christmas? This is because of every silent one before it. I could hear her swallow. So what now? Are you cutting us out? I'm setting boundaries, I said. Something I should have done long ago. She didn't argue. For once there was no pleading, no justification, just the soft sound of her resignation. Do you still want a relationship with us? She asked, voice low. I thought about that. I want a relationship with the people who see me, who value me beyond my usefulness. If you can be one of those people, then yes. If not, then no. A long silence followed. I'll call again soon, she said quietly. We'll see, I replied, and hung up. I stood there for a while, the phone still in my hand. No sadness, no rush of emotion, just stillness, like walking out of a room that had been too loud for too long. That evening, I lit the fire in the living room. Not because it was cold, but because I wanted to. I pulled a blanket over my lap and opened a book Reed had given me months ago, one I'd never made time to read. Outside, the lights in other houses flickered on, one by one. Behind each window, families bustled about, some joyful, some strained, some just pretending. And here I was, alone, but not lonely. There's a difference, one I had ignored for years. For the first time in a long while, I had no obligations, no unpaid gratitude hovering in the corners, just space and silence, and the sound of the fire breathing softly across the room. On New Year's Eve, I found myself watching the clock more out of habit than celebration. Midnight didn't mean what it used to. No champagne, no dancing in the kitchen, no Derek tapping his watch and saying, "Another year wiser, Edith." Just me, sitting in my armchair, a blanket over my knees, and a mug of tea gone lukewarm. The fireworks outside started early. Distant bursts of color and noise that didn't reach my windows. I watched them without moving. Then the doorbell rang. Not once, but twice. Insistent, unfamiliar. I opened it to find Megan standing there. She wasn't alone. Owen hovered behind her, his face pale in the porch light, hands stuffed deep into his coat pockets. "Megan," I said. "Happy New Year," she said, though her tone didn't match the words. Her hair was pinned back, her lipstick perfect, as if she'd stepped out of someone else's evening. "Is it?" I asked. She blinked, caught off guard, then forced a smile. "We were in the neighborhood." I glanced at Owen. He didn't meet my eyes. "You weren't invited," I said. Not cruel, just factual. "I thought we could talk," she replied. I stepped back, letting them in without a word. The air behind them brought in a gust of cold and the scent of someone else's perfume. Megan's heels clicked across the floor like she owned the place. Owen followed, smaller somehow. They sat on the couch, side by side. I remained standing. "You've been making some decisions," Megan began, crossing her legs. "Yes." "Legal ones?" "That's right. And not just about the will. Michael said the bank called." "I've closed the joint accounts," I said. They were never meant to be permanent. She nodded slowly, lips pressed together. It's just sudden. No, I said. It's overdue. Owen finally looked up. His face was flushed. Grandma, I didn't want to send that message. I know, I said gently. But you did. Megan placed a hand on his arm. He's just a teenager, Edith. He's 16, I said. Old enough to drive a car. Old enough to know when someone is being erased. Her expression tightened. I understand your frustration, she said. But cutting everyone off? I'm not cutting everyone off, I interrupted. I'm choosing who gets access to me. That's not revenge, that's boundaries. A silence stretched between us. Do you want to see the kids again? She asked finally. Clara? Max? I took a breath. Of course I do. But not as an afterthought. Not when it's convenient for you. If I'm in their lives, it's because I'm present. Not because I'm tolerated. Megan shifted. This is going to upset Michael. It already has, I said. He's upset that the woman he ignored for a decade remembered who she was. Owen's voice cracked. Are you mad at me? I turned to him. No, I'm disappointed. And I think you're better than the message you sent. But that's not something I can decide for you. He nodded slowly. Megan stood. Well, we've said what we came to say. I walked them to the door. Before she stepped out, Megan turned. You always liked being dramatic, Edith. I smiled. And you always liked pretending that made you superior. She blinked, just once. Then she was gone. Owen lingered. I do love you, Grandma, he said. I just didn't know how to say it then. I believe you, I said. But you'll have to show it now. Words aren't enough anymore. He nodded, eyes bright. I watched them walk down the path, her arm around his shoulder like a claim. The fireworks cracked again in the distance, new colors, new noise. But this time, I didn't flinch. I closed the door and locked it, not out of fear, but because peace deserves protection. The day after New Year's, I found myself in the spare room, standing in front of the old cedar chest. It hadn't been opened in years. Dust lay thick on the lid, and the key was still in the drawer where Derek used to hide it, tucked inside an empty matchbox, as if that made it invisible. I opened the chest slowly. The scent rose up. Cedar, paper, something older than both. Inside were remnants of a different life. Mine, though I'd nearly forgotten. Scarves I had knit before arthritis stole the ease from my fingers. A pair of ballet slippers Thelma had outgrown, but I couldn't throw away. A faded blue sweater I'd worn the day I brought Michael home from the hospital. And at the very bottom, wrapped in tissue, was a stack of holiday cards I had made by hand, year after year, back when love was something we crafted, not purchased. I ran my fingers over them. The paper was soft at the edges, like it had listened too long. I sat on the floor and spread the cards around me. Most were signed with careful loops and dotted hearts. Love, Mom, Grandma Edith. Some included little notes. Hope this makes you smile. Tell the kids I miss them. I imagined them opening these cards, tossing them on tables, maybe even in bins, barely reading. I imagined Megan's tight smile, Michael's distracted, "Oh, Mom sent something again." Still, I had written them, believing each time that it mattered. This year, I hadn't sent any. Instead, I had rewritten my will. The new version sat now in a locked drawer in my desk, witnessed, notarized, clean and clear. Reed and Audrey were named primary beneficiaries, not because they had begged or earned it with flattery, but because they showed up, not just once but consistently, because they remembered I was more than an obligation. I didn't do it to make a point. I did it to correct one. I was still sitting there on the floor when the phone rang. It was a landline ring, slow, deliberate, the kind of sound no one under 30 hears anymore. Hello? Mrs. Thornberry? This is Lori from St. Margaret's. My breath caught. Yes? I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I'm organizing volunteers for the community dinner next week. Reed mentioned you might be interested. I smiled. Did he? Yes. He said you used to host half the neighborhood every Christmas. I did, I said, before I stopped being invited to anyone else's. She chuckled awkwardly. Well, we could use someone with your experience, if you're willing. I'm more than willing, I said. I've got time, and I've still got recipes. She gave me the details, her voice warm. I wrote them down slowly, letting the words sink in. A new plan, a new room to walk into. After I hung up, I sat back against the cedar chest. The afternoon light spilled across the floor like something poured gently, without asking. I thought of Reed in the church hall, setting up chairs. I pictured Audrey fussing over tablecloths and coffee urns. I could see myself there. Not the guest, not the outsider. Someone with sleeves rolled up, hands in dough, voice raised in laughter. The realization was quiet but firm. I was done asking for a seat at the wrong tables. Let them eat their dry turkey and talk over one another. I'd rather serve soup to strangers and feel seen. There's more family in kindness than in bloodlines. I know that now. And I've never been afraid of starting over. Not really. Not when I know how much I'm still capable of giving. And now, finally, I know who's worthy of receiving it. I arrived early to St. Margaret's the morning of the community dinner, bundled in my old gray coat and a scarf Audrey had insisted I take. The air was sharp, the kind that stings your lungs but wakes you up in the right way. It reminded me of mornings long ago. School lunches packed, Derek scraping ice from the windshield, my hands always too cold, always too busy. Lori met me at the door. She was younger than I'd pictured, maybe mid-30s, hair pulled back in a way that said she had too much to do to worry about looking polished. Her smile was real, though. Not the kind people wear when they're about to ask for something. Edith, you're early. I'm always early when soup's involved, I said. She laughed and handed me an apron. You're on vegetable prep with Audrey and another volunteer. Reed's out back organizing the donation bins. I nodded and followed her through the warm, bustling hall. The kitchen was alive. Steam rising, metal clanging, voices overlapping like an old hymn. It was the kind of noise that soothed because it came from purpose. Audrey was already there, sleeves rolled up, chopping carrots with the precision of someone who'd done this before. She lit up when she saw me. Thank God, she said. They gave me the dullest knife in the building. I took the station beside her. You're young. They didn't trust you with the real ones. She grinned and handed me a cutting board. For the next hour, we worked side by side. No small talk, no forced catching up, just quiet teamwork. I peeled, she chopped. We moved in rhythm, a rhythm that felt earned. At one point, she paused and touched my arm. You know, she said, Reed talks about you more than he admits. Says you're the only one who listens without judging. I smiled. That's because I ran out of energy to judge a long time ago. She laughed. Still, it matters. You matter. The words landed somewhere deep, not dramatic, not loud, just honest. We finished prepping just as the first guests began to arrive. Elderly men in threadbare coats, single mothers balancing toddlers, young couples who looked like they hadn't smiled in weeks. I saw myself in all of them. Different shapes of loneliness, different shades of being unseen. Lori handed me a ladle. "You're on soup duty." I took my place at the table, next to a tray of warm rolls and a line of chipped bowls. One by one, people came through. Some nodded thanks. Some didn't look up. Some murmured, "God bless you," with eyes that had seen too much. And with each bowl I filled, something inside me steadied. This was giving, not out of guilt, not to be remembered or rewarded, just giving. Reed passed by now and then, carrying crates, laughing with the younger volunteers. Once, he stopped beside me and touched my shoulder. "You're glowing," he said. "Must be the steam," I replied, but I knew better. Hours passed like minutes. When the last guest left and the last pan was scrubbed, I felt the ache in my feet, the pull in my lower back, but also something else. Satisfaction. We sat around the long table afterward, volunteers with mugs of cocoa, swapping stories, resting elbows on wood worn smooth by time. Audrey leaned into Reed's side, and he held her hand openly. No performance, no posturing, just presence. Lori raised her cup. "To Edith," she said. "The only person here who peeled 20 pounds of carrots without complaint." Everyone laughed, even me. "To Edith," they echoed. It wasn't the kind of toast you frame or quote in a eulogy, but it was the kind that said, "You belong here." And that, I've learned, is more powerful than any inheritance. The next Sunday morning, I woke with a sharp ache in my hip, a reminder that even purpose doesn't protect you from age. I took my time getting out of bed, letting the quiet of the house settle around me. It wasn't silence anymore. It was peace. After breakfast, I opened the notebook where I now kept my weekly plans. Not the kind I used to make. Appointments, birthdays, things for others. These were mine alone. Bake the molasses cake, visit Mrs. Colton, sort the linen drawer. Today, I wrote just one thing: talk to Reed. He'd been calling often lately, not long, meandering conversations, just check-ins, updates, a recipe question, a recommendation for a mystery novel, small threads that kept us stitched together. But I knew we were circling something bigger. At noon, he arrived with a brown paper bag and a cautious smile. "I brought lunch," he said. "Egg salad. Don't judge me." I raised an eyebrow. "If it's got celery, we'll have words." He grinned and followed me into the kitchen. We ate at the table like we always did, window cracked just enough to let in the crisp air. Outside, someone's wind chime played a song I almost recognized. Halfway through our sandwiches, he set his fork down. "I told Dad about the will." I paused. "You didn't have to." "I know, but I needed to." I waited. "He said you were being manipulated, that Audrey and I were taking advantage of you." I blinked once. That's a new flavor of irony. "He said you're vulnerable now, that you're angry, acting out." I took a sip of tea. Let me guess, he offered to handle everything just to make things easier. Reed nodded, eyes down. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't expect him to turn it into a strategy." "You shouldn't be sorry," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." "But he's my father. And I'm your grandmother. Life is full of difficult truths." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. "He said the money isn't the point, that you're destroying the family by playing favorites." I almost laughed. They destroyed the family the day they turned love into currency. Reed looked up. "You really believe that?" "I know it," I said, "because I was part of it for too long. I handed out checks when I should have been handing out no's. I bought silence instead of asking questions. I let them treat me like a vault instead of a person." A long pause followed. He looked older in that moment. Wiser, maybe. or just tired. I don't want any of this to break you and them forever, he said softly. I reached across the table and took his hand. It already broke. I'm just choosing not to sit in the rubble. He nodded, squeezing my fingers. I don't expect you to take sides, I said. But I do expect you to protect your own soul. Don't become like them. I won't, he whispered. I swear. We sat there a while, not talking. The wind picked up outside, and the chimes played louder now, no longer unsure of their melody. When Reed left, he kissed my cheek and said, "We're coming by next weekend, Audrey and I. We want to help you build that raised bed in the yard." I smiled. "We'd better start soon. Spring comes fast if you're paying attention." He turned at the door. "And Grandma?" "Yes?" "Thanks for not giving up." I closed the door after him and leaned against it. My hips still ached, my knees too. But my heart, no, that felt stronger. Because there's something deeply powerful about being underestimated. It means they don't see you coming. And by the time they do, you've already reclaimed your life. I visited the bank on a Monday morning. The kind of morning where the wind presses against your coat like it's trying to remind you how fragile you are. I wore my best wool, the one with the good buttons still intact, and I carried a folder under my arm, thin but heavy with decisions. The teller recognized me. "Mrs. Thornberry," she said warmly. "How are you?" "I'm here to close an account," I replied. "Of course, I'll get someone from investments." The office was warm and overly beige. I sat across from a young man with neat hair and the practiced empathy of someone trained to nod at bad news. "I understand you want to terminate a joint trust," he said. "Yes," I said. "Effective immediately." He blinked. "May I ask why?" "You may," I replied. "Because I'm done funding people who've forgotten I exist unless money's involved." He hesitated, then typed something into his computer. "The process is straightforward, but your son will be notified." "I expect he will." "You don't need to give notice?" "I've already done that," I said, in ways that mattered. He handed me the papers. I signed them slowly, carefully, my signature steady as it ever was. When I handed them back, it felt like setting down a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying across decades. "Do you want to redirect the funds?" he asked. "Yes, into a personal savings and a new scholarship fund." He raised his eyebrows. "For?" "Adult women returning to education, with children, no co-signers allowed." He smiled, this time without training. That's wonderful." "It's fair," I said, "and overdue." He filed the documents. When I stood to leave, he offered his hand. "I hope someone sees what you've done," he said. "I do," I replied. Outside, the wind was just as sharp, but I walked slower now, more upright, more aware of my own posture, as if my spine had remembered it had permission to be proud. That afternoon, I called Mr. Halverson, my lawyer. "It's done," I told him. "The accounts are closed. The fund is in motion." "Excellent," he said. "And the will?" "Finalized," I replied, "unless I meet someone in my 90s worth adding." He chuckled. "I'll leave space for notes." I spent the evening going through my address book, real, leather-bound, pages yellowed at the corners. I crossed out names I hadn't called in years. I circled ones I had overlooked. I called Mrs. Colton, my old neighbor from 2 doors down. We spoke for an hour. I called a woman from church whose daughter had moved to Canada. I called a cousin I hadn't seen since Derek's funeral. And with each voice, I stitched something back together. Not the past, not nostalgia, but a sense of place, of self. Later that night, I poured a small glass of sherry and sat by the fire. The room was quiet, but not silent. The house had learned my rhythm again. It didn't creak as much now. Or maybe I didn't flinch when it did. I thought about Michael, about how quickly love can turn into assumption, how kindness, when expected too long, starts to feel like currency. But I didn't hate him. I pitied the version of him who thought control was love, who mistook silence for loyalty, and who never once looked back to ask if the hands that fed him were still steady or shaking. I raised my glass, not in toast, but in closure, to what was, to what will never be again, and to the peace in between. I had expected to feel something more after the bank visit. Triumph, maybe, or regret. But what came instead was clarity, a quiet, grounded kind of knowing that doesn't need applause. That Friday, I met with Mr. Halverson again, this time in person. His office smelled like old books and floor polish, and he still used a fountain pen, which I respected. "I've drawn up the final letter," he said, sliding the envelope across the table. "You're not required to send it, but I thought you might appreciate having something on your terms." The envelope was thick, cream-colored, my name typed in a calm serif font. I opened it and read. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was simple. "To Michael and Thelma, this is to inform you that the terms of my estate have changed. You are no longer listed as beneficiaries. This is not punishment. It's recognition. You have lived for many years without my presence or participation, except where money was involved. I am finally following your lead. I wish you well. Mother." I folded the letter neatly and placed it back inside the envelope. "I'll hold on to it for now," I said. "Let silence do its work a bit longer." He nodded. Sometimes silence is the loudest statement. When I got home, the phone was ringing. It was Michael. I didn't answer. He called again the next day, then once more on Sunday morning. I let each one go to voicemail, not out of spite, but because I wanted to see if he'd leave something more than excuses, more than the same tired rhythm of guilt dressed as concern. On the fourth try, he finally left a message. "Mom, it's Michael. I heard what you've done. I think we need to talk. I think you're overreacting. Megan says this isn't like you. Call me back. Please." I listened to it once, then deleted it. That afternoon, I went into town with Audrey. We stopped at the thrift store, browsed through old books and dishware, picked up a few spring bulbs for planting. "You seem lighter," she said, as we walked back to the car. "I am," I said. "I've been walking around for years with my hands full. It took me this long to realize I could put things down." She smiled, opened the trunk. "You're teaching me a lot, you know." "I'm not trying to," I said. "Exactly. That's why it works." At home, I planted the bulbs. My knees complained, my back protested, but I kept going. Dirt under my nails, wind in my sleeves. It felt like something holy, like the earth was accepting what I gave without question or judgment. Reed came by in the evening to help finish the bed frame for the garden. He brought a small folding chair and made me sit while he did most of the hammering. "You're not retired from everything," he said, "just from lifting things alone." When he finished, we sat together on the porch. "I saw Dad this morning," he said. "He looked thinner." "Guilt burns energy," I said. "He's worried." "Good." Reed hesitated. "You won't change your mind?" I shook my head. "No. And if I do, it won't be because someone called 3 times in a row." He nodded. "He doesn't know what to do with a version of you he can't manage." "That's his problem," I said, "not mine." The stars were just starting to come out. I pulled the blanket tighter over my shoulders and breathed in the cold. Spring would come. It always did. But this time, I'd made space for it. Not just in the soil, but in me. He came alone. I saw his car from the kitchen window, same silver sedan he's had for years, tires crunching slow across the gravel like it knew it wasn't welcome. He parked too close to the rose bush. Derek would have shouted through the screen, told him to back up and try again. But there was no one left to shout now, just me, and I didn't bother. I stayed at the sink, drying my hands on the dish towel, watching as he stepped out. No gift, no bag, just him, in a dark coat and the slouched posture of someone rehearsing an apology. He didn't knock right away. He stood there on the porch for a full minute, maybe more. Then finally, 3 quiet knocks. Not tentative, not strong. Just tired. I opened the door. "Hi, Mom," he said. I didn't answer, just held the door. He stepped in, looked around like he was trying to remember where everything had been. Nothing much had changed. Same rug, same mirror, same scent of lemon oil and something faintly sweet. But maybe it felt different now. Not his. "Nice to see you," he tried again. Still, I said nothing. He cleared his throat. "I got your message. About the changes." "I didn't send one." He blinked. Reed told me. About the accounts. The will. That's not a message. That's a fact." He looked down at his shoes, then back at me. "Can we talk?" I nodded once and led him into the living room. He sat on the edge of the couch, like it might tip if he leaned back. I stayed in my armchair, the one that had become more throne than seat. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The clock ticked. A car passed outside. The house held its breath. Then he started. "I don't know how we got here," he said. "It feels like I blinked and suddenly you were gone." "I've been here," I said, "the whole time." He nodded slowly. "I know. I just mean, I didn't expect this." "No," I said. "You expected me to stay quiet, stay grateful, stay convenient." His eyes flickered, but he didn't deny it. "I worked hard, Mom," he said. "I built a life." "With help," I added. "Yes," he admitted. "With help. From you. And I never said thank you enough." "I see that now." "It's not about thank you," I said. "It's about presence, respect, truth." "Didn't mean to push you out. But you didn't pull me in either." He sighed, ran a hand over his face. "Megan's complicated." "No," I said. "She's clear. You're the one who let it happen." That landed. He looked around the room again, as if trying to gather himself. "So what now? You've made your point. Are we just done?" I studied him. Lines in his face. The slump in his shoulders. The boy I raised still flickered behind his eyes, but dimmed by years of assumption. "No," I said. "We're not done. But we're not going back either." He swallowed. "So what does that mean?" "It means I won't pretend anymore," I said. "If you want to be in my life, you come as a son. Not as a manager, not as an heir. Not as someone who needs something. I don't need anything." "You need permission to be decent," I said. "That's what I'm taking away." He blinked at that. Sat back. Let the words settle. "I'm tired, Michael," I said softer now. "Tired of performing. Tired of wondering if love still counts when the checks stop." He looked down again, voice lower. "I'm sorry." "I believe you," I said. "But it doesn't change the past." "I know." Another silence. Not cold, just full. He stood after a while. "I should go." I nodded. At the door he hesitated. "If I call, will you answer?" "If it's to talk," I said. "Not to convince." He nodded once. "Okay." He stepped outside, then turned back. "You're different now." "I finally remembered who I was," I said. He stood there a second longer, then walked to the car. I didn't watch him leave. I just closed the door. Softly. And with peace. I sat down after he left. Same chair. Same cushion, with the worn-out corner where Derek used to rest his arm. The house didn't feel changed, but I did. There was no relief. No victory. Just a deep, still kind of truth. The kind you don't speak aloud, because it doesn't need witnesses. I had looked my son in the eyes and said what needed saying. And this time, I didn't apologize for the saying. Later that evening, I found myself reaching for the old tin box I kept in the hutch. The one labeled receipts, though most of them weren't. Inside were letters. Some mine, some Derek's. Notes I'd never mailed. Christmas cards I'd written but couldn't bring myself to send. A strange archive of restraint and yearning. One envelope was addressed to myself. I had forgotten it entirely. It was dated January 3rd, 8 years ago, a day after I had been left out of Clara's 3rd birthday party. The writing was smaller then. Careful. Holding back. Dear Edith, stop making excuses for them. Stop pretending you weren't meant to feel the sting. You did. You always do. And every time you swallow it, it finds another place in your body to live. One day, it'll become pain in your chest or a cramp in your soul. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to be done. I read it 3 times. Then I put it back in the tin. Not because I needed the reminder, but because it had finally been heard. The next morning, I walked to the florist on Oak Street. A little shop with dusty windows and a bell that jingled like an afterthought. I bought 3 pots of hyacinths and a spool of ribbon. The woman behind the counter asked if I had something to celebrate. Yes, I said. Myself. At home, I placed 1 hyacinth on the kitchen table, 1 by the fireplace, and 1 in the room where I sometimes wrote things no one would read. They smelled like spring, even though the ground was still hard and gray. Around noon, Reed called. "Hey, Grandma," he said, voice warm. "Audrey and I are heading to the market. Thought we'd swing by afterward. She wants to show you something." "You're both always welcome," I said. He paused. "Dad told me he came by." "He did." And nothing. We spoke. We were honest. He let out a breath. He looked off when he came back. "He's not used to being told no," I said, "especially not by women who don't explain themselves." Reed chuckled. "I like this version of you." "I always liked her too," I said. "She was just busy keeping everyone else afloat." When they arrived that afternoon, Audrey brought a small box wrapped in brown paper. "It's a late Christmas gift," she said, "but it's more than that." Inside was a printed booklet, maybe 30 pages, stapled neatly with a soft cream cover. On the front it read, "Things Edith Taught Me." I opened it. Each page held a quote, a moment, a lesson. Some I remembered saying, some I didn't. Don't water people who pretend to be plants. Love isn't currency. If it is, spend it elsewhere. If they only come when they want something, stop answering the door. Tears came before I could stop them. I thought, maybe more people should read these, Audrey said. So we printed a few. For the church, for the library, for anyone who needs them. Reed took my hand. "You're not just our grandmother," he said. "You're a voice some people haven't heard yet, but they need to." I didn't speak. I couldn't. Not because there was nothing to say, but because, finally, someone else was saying it for me. The booklet stayed on my table for days, not because I needed to reread it, but because it meant something to see myself reflected in someone else's ink. Audrey had captured me better than I ever could have. Not the version of me they used to invite to fill a seat, or the one they forgot to call. The real me. One morning, I found a note in the mailbox, handwritten, no return address. Mrs. Thornberry, I read your little book at the church pantry. I don't know who you are, but I think I want to become someone like you. My own mother never said those kinds of things. Thank you. I hope you keep speaking. Just a woman trying. I stood on the porch, reading it 3 times. Then I went inside and wrote one more thing in my notebook. Speak again. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a while. It was about reclaiming voice, space, breath. About reminding myself and anyone who cared to notice that I had not disappeared, I had not faded. I had simply paused, like a breath before a sentence that mattered. Weeks passed. Reed and Audrey came often, helped in the yard, brought groceries I didn't ask for, sat with me through long evenings when the wind clawed at the windows and the loneliness tried to sneak back in. One night, Audrey said, "We've been thinking about having a baby." I didn't cry. I just held her hand, felt the weight of legacy shift, not in money or property, but in presence. "If you do," I said, "promise me one thing." "Anything," she whispered. "Let them hear the truth early. Let them know that silence isn't peace, that they come from women who speak." She nodded, her eyes shining. By spring, the bulbs bloomed. Hyacinths and tulips and the daffodils Reed planted along the back fence. The yard was still uneven, the soil still stubborn. But beauty came anyway. I started hosting Thursday lunches. Nothing fancy. Just soup and bread, a slice of cake, a kitchen that stayed open. Women from the church came, then a few neighbors, then strangers. They brought stories with them. Hard ones, honest ones. We didn't offer solutions. We just listened. And that, I've found, is its own kind of healing. Michael hasn't called again. Thelma sent one card, late, unsigned. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Sometimes peace means letting go of the people who only come to stay comfortable. Sometimes dignity means refusing to be their cushion. And sometimes healing means becoming the version of yourself you needed 20 years ago and offering her to someone else. I'm still here, still steady, still speaking. And if any part of my story stayed with you, if you saw yourself in the quiet, the ache, the rise, I hope you do something with that. Speak, write, get up, say no, say yes. Reclaim the version of yourself they tried to edit down. And when you do, come back and tell me. I'll be here, by the window, with tea on the stove and a seat at the table, waiting for the next woman to remember who she is. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, leave a comment. Let someone know they're not alone.